The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be a world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought you were boxing.
All right. So we have Championship Tour megastar, current world number 5, the Jordy Smith on the lineup today. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, guys. It's good to fit you in my jam-packed schedule here.
I was going to ask, how are you doing today? Where are you today? And who are you with?
I'm in Sydney. I'm in quarantine with my wife and son. And I think we've been in here, I think 8 or 9 days. And yeah, only a few left to go. So to be honest with you, it's been awesome. It's, this is my third set of quarantine now. I've been through a few since the tour got put on hold. And I think this is by far the best one. So
I think having a little kid with you, like a lot of people complain, they're like, I just don't know how to like occupy my days. But man, having a kid, like you're just like, I'm busy. By the end of the day, you're probably like, yep, that day just flew by.
Yeah, it is. Definitely having a kid helps. And I think just having a good perspective as well, you think about somebody like Nelson Mandela who sat 25 years. So 2 weeks is really it's nothing.
I appreciate the perspective. I'm not going to say I've seen any comments from our fellow surfers on tour, but certainly some of the other athletes from other sports that came in and were comparing the quarantine to being in prison probably misspoke or certainly didn't think before they typed something out.
Yeah. I don't think any of the athletes have spent time in prison, but
that maybe on the tour a few years ago, certainly not today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in getting ready for this podcast, I was really excited, and I thought, well, geez, like you're not an old dude, you're a young dude, but you've done so much, and we're going to kind of move through a bunch of different topics, I think, because you've already led one of the more fascinating, lives and careers that we've seen in professional surfing. But I thought maybe as a jumping off point, we'd start with kind of the present and a little bit of the future. And I know we chatted about almost before we got started, but with regards to the non-season of 2021 and the recommencement of Championship Tour competition, do you consider that somewhat of a rebirth for yourself in terms of your career? Because it's just been a quiet period and now you're back.
Absolutely. I took that entire year, so to speak, as basically just refuel. Just keep refuel, throw more logs on the fire. For me personally, a lot of really amazing things happened. Obviously, first and foremost, having a son is something that I've always wanted my whole life. And then for that to happen and for me to actually be present during that whole process, of kind of my wife's pregnancy. If I had been on tour, I don't think I would have got to experience a lot of that just based on having to go to events, being up and down around the world. I would have missed a lot of it. And so I was, that really on a positive side happened really well. And then on the other side of it, on like my professional surfing side of things, I got to surf and stay home for a South African winter for the first time in, I want to even say like 15, 17 years where I actually did it properly. And even 17 years ago, I didn't have a license. I couldn't get up and down the coast the way I wanted to, things like that. So for the first time in my life, I actually got to experience my country and my coastline and just kind of revisit some of the places that I had been when I was a kid and bring back a lot of the memories of why I started and how those feelings were for me. And then to go back and kind of rekindle that was really something special. And yeah, it was like just really, really needed. I think we had so much time off that it was nice to be able to look at things and then go like, hey, when it's go time, I'm ready to put my head down and give it everything. You need the off to be able to have the on at 100%, I feel.
Before we had the non-season of 2020 and that big chunk of time off, were there years where you'd felt a bit fatigued in terms of like competitive drive? Had you felt yourself kind of being like, I don't know if I'm really into this, and did you feel it in the moment, or is it something that you kind of look back through hindsight in 2020 and thought, I didn't realize it at the time, but I needed this break?
Yeah, to be honest, I've never really had that feeling of like, oh, I need a break. And I don't think you kind of do until you're in it, that you really feel like, it was necessary. But if anything, I think I might have felt that when I was more early on in my career.
Right.
The first 3 years, I feel like it was a whole lot of like, obviously coming on tour, being a rookie, then trying to find yourself, trying to find a place within this tour, and kind of a travel routine, travel buddies, people to ask for advice. And that was right in the peak of like Kelly and Andy's whole thing, Mick and Joel were kind of coming up through their thing. And so there was just like myself and Dane, so to speak, we're just trying to find a place within this tour and trying to figure everything out. I was so, at that point, stuck between like winning events and getting amazing video parts. And, I was raised on video parts, and I had so much excitement doing them that was kind of my focus for at least 5 years, first 5 years.
Ryan Callanan was on the podcast several episodes ago, and he said something that stuck with me about surfing, because he was talking about his knee injury that he has to manage. And he said, he goes, surfing, he goes, we all love it, and it's so fun that it's almost impossible to say no to it. It's impossible to say no to like another wave or another session or another contest or another trip. And he goes, you don't realize you're getting burned out because you just love it so much. But after you kind of have almost in a lot of ways like forced time off through like an injury or pandemic, you realize like, oh man, like it was good to get a break.
Absolutely. I think he's spot on by saying that. It's surfing such a weird thing. It's like, I don't know, I can't equate, you can't put it in the same, line with any other sport, because, I speak to close friends, like I'll speak to Sia. He's like the captain of our South African rugby team. And I'll say to him like, hey, you can win an event, and if the waves are that good, if you're in Tahiti, you won the event and there's nobody out, you have that feeling of like, I want to go back out there. If there's nobody out there and the waves are still 6 to 8 feet and firing, you'd be straight back out there going, it's just too good. I got to be a part of this. There's no way a rugby player wins the World Cup, gets back on the field and goes, hey, let's go for another round of rugby. Or it doesn't happen. They're like, hey, let's get home. Let's go to the, we're out of here. So I think it's just a really strange one like that.
Totally. I mean, we talk about it all the time because we get to interact with, as you do, athletes from other disciplines. And, we always joke about like, well, what do surfers do on their day off? They go surfing. Like if you're a rugby player, you're like, I'm going to enjoy myself on my day off. I'm not playing rugby, like it's interesting. And what you're saying about when you came on tour as well, because that was, I've been on, this is my 16th year, but I was doing internationally was starting the tour right around the same time as you and Dane. And I was thinking back on your career, and it's so impressive because you're already secure objectively, in your reputation as one of Africa's most successful surfers, up alongside Sean Thompson and Wendy Boita and Martin Potter. You were part of the modern collective generation that really redefined performance-free surfing. You've won back-to-back CTs at J-Bay, 2010 and 2011. You've won 6 CTs all up. And this stat really struck me. It was, you have finished in the top 10 8 times out of your 12 seasons, including one that you're injured. And of those 8 times, you're in the top 5 6 times. It's so beyond impressive to me. but it's also one of those things too, where you talked about having to find your feet in the early years. And I remember the radical expectations people had on you to kind of win out the gate. And I was wondering if you were aware of that at the time and how you felt about it.
Yeah, I definitely was aware of it at the time. It was hard not to be. It was hard to go anywhere within the surf industry and not to be kind of told that this is what you're going to do, or this is what you're going to achieve. And to be honest with you, 2 years before I got on tour, I was just, quite honestly, I was still that high school kid that was in school. My mom shitting on me every day, like, hey, you need to finish school. She's a school teacher. So, and it just the spotlight came so fast for me. I wasn't groomed through the media hype and stuff like that. Things happened really for me from the minute I got at 17. I got third at J-Bay in the CT, to the following that same year got second at Sunset, and then the next year qualifying. So within like an 8-month period, everything my whole world just changed. And like I said, I just went from your average school kid to on the WCT and all these like massive media hype things that I was just unaware of and just had no idea about how to navigate all that stuff, So
I mean, the hype machine was so loud. Like and it's one of those things too where it doesn't happen every year. It happens, in men's surfing probably every 5 to 10 years. You could argue that the planets aligned when you qualified, and then those years between when you finished third at J-Bay and qualifying, in a way that really hadn't happened since McFanning. Like, you had the competitive pedigree, you had this backstory coming out of South Africa, you had these free surfing bona fides, and then you had this. It was kind of at the time when the media was getting really interested in like the trade news around the bidding war with the brands kind of clamoring for you. I just remember having to drink it all in, like working at the ASP at the time, and we're aware of you coming on, and we're like, wow, that's a lot of pressure, Even the year when you kind of rode with no stickers on your board, I remember that was quite a story.
Yeah, I think everything, and none of it was planned. Hey, it was all just like feeling based, and riding with no stickers. That was purely because we decided that we wanted to just go off on our own and start from the ground up and just see where that kind of took us. Borrowing money from my dad, having garage sales, things like that, selling his car so that we can get to events, and then using the money from the events to get to the next one. But I think all of it just added to the story and the hype, And so, yeah.
Totally. And it kind of brings to mind, like, I'm not sure if it's the same, in outside of the US, but in the US you have like, a ton of contract kind of stories around whether you're a football player, basketball player, et cetera. And there's situations where players really kind of like say no to more money so they can bet on themselves for a year to get that contract in the end. And I think that's kind of similar to what you guys did that year, where you said, look, like, we're going to say no to kind of what's in front of us right now and really kind of invest in ourselves for the year. And hopefully something comes out of it at the end. And I'll out from the outside, it seems like it did.
Yeah, look, it definitely worked in my favor for sure. I couldn't have signed with a better brand, with O'Neill at the time. And I think everything just happens for a reason. I've really become a big kind of believer in that. And I think I just, I kind of put everything out there. I work my hardest, and I just let things kind of lay where they will. And I don't really look back much. It's just all positive. And I'm just stoked, just super stoked.
When you did come on tour, you mentioned the Andy Kelly dominance, which was like a real big kind of 5-year chunk. And the Australians, like, Mick, Taj, Joel, Dino, were all kind of laying in wait. So even after like Andy Kelly wrapped up around 2006, I guess, Mick won in 2007, when you came on, it felt like there was probably still a lot of space for you to do what you wanted to do, right? Which I think kind of created that vacuum for you and Dane to be like, yep, we can do the tour. We can also do the Kai Neville films. Did you feel pressure right away to kind of win events, or did you feel like you had space to be like, look, I'm going to do the best surfing I can on tour, but I really want to get these video parts nailed?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. When I first came on, it was I still felt like I had proving to do, and it was hard to do it at some of the events. So the only other way we were going to do it was in films, and to be able to, I felt like I needed to kind of justify myself as being a pretty good surfer, and I wanted to do it with a bunch.
Why did you though? Like, why did you feel like you needed to do that? Because I say that because you qualified, but I'm wondering where that need to justify yourself came from.
For myself, I think I wanted to prove to myself that I could, match it like with Dane Reynolds and with, everybody else in Kai's film, pretty much. But my main driving force was Dane. It was like, I don't feel like I would have pushed as hard as I did if Dane wasn't there. And he just kind of, whether he knew it or not, it just that's what got me inspired. That's what I amped out on. And it was exciting, man. And then I think as time goes on, things just kind of shift, people shift, motivation shifts. Once he stopped the tour, then I started looking at other people to kind of not compare myself to, but just to feed off of. And obviously now it's the heavy hitters are like John, Gabby, and Italo. Yeah.
Did you find Dane competitive with you at the time? Did you feel like he was being intentionally competitive, whether it was, trying to bag free surfing clips or just on the CT?
I don't necessarily think it was with me. I think he is competitive. When he paddles out in a lineup, he wants to nail the best clip he possibly can. And, it might not come in a jersey with, 30 minutes attached to it, but when he's paddling out, he definitely wants to put out a great video part or get like insane waves, and rip them to shit. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
One of the benefits of getting you on the podcast is I get to justify watching, things like The Modern Collective and Bending Colors and all sorts of good shit, which were around that time. We're talking, late aughties. I think Bending Colors came out in 2012. It was striking to me how far ahead of its time your surfing was then, and I think we appreciated it at the time, but it's still so radical and fast and powerful and progressive, and it would hold up today, as sort of cutting edge today. And I'm curious, when you qualified, did you feel like you had all the tools in your sort of surfing approach to be a world champion or a world title contender, or were there parts of your surfing that you were aware of that you needed to work on?
Definitely not. I didn't have all the tools. No way. The first year I got on tour, that was the first time that I started going left. To be honest, I grew up in the land of right points and beach break, right, and mostly all right, and even the beach breaks are all right-handers. I can't even think of, there's probably one left that's maybe worth going and surfing in South Africa. And it's really flat at that. So my whole going backside, especially in bigger waves, was just non-existent. And it just took me being on tour to be able to try and figure that out. And it's hard, because you spend so much time going up and down and around the world to find that time. Obviously, being South African passport holder, you can't just see a swell and go and strike those waves to go and get them. You've got to put 2 to 3 weeks in advance to get a visa to be able to go and get it. So at that point, I would be getting visas, hoping there would be a swell, then there wouldn't be a swell. And I did that for many years. And then, it's tough really working on your surfing. I think at the same time, like, I believe that you only get, I think all your skill gets built from 15 years old to 25 years old. I think 80% of your skill gets built there. I think the last 20% can come from then onwards. But, if I'm looking at like anybody surfing, them at 25 to get if they spend another 10 years surfing, I don't think they're going to get 80%. They don't have that percentage of getting better, that much better. It's more fine tuning at that point, and like dialing in your equipment, which will be 3 to 4, 5%. Then your health is going to be 5%, and your fitness, and then it's probably your surfing 10%. Really getting more experience at those waves that you're going to surf and that you're in. That makes you kind of the complete surfer.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Like, because they also talk about, if you really want to be fluent in a foreign language, you kind of have to learn it between, the ages of like 4 and 8. Not that you can't be completely proficient in a language if you learn it after that, but your brain is learning specifically between those ages. And that's where like true fluency comes from. And I always liken that to surfing in a way, like the younger you can get comfortable in certain waves and that experience, like reading the ocean is like a language in and of itself, and it sounds like it's almost a similar way to how you're describing like your development window is here, and that's where you're going to build all your surfing muscle. And as you said, you can fine tune it beyond that. But, even things like, and you would have had this experience since you were on the same team as John with O'Neill for a period of time, looking at John's kind of comfort level in places like pipe, like, a lot of that is probably just his advantage of having grown up there. His brain is probably attuned to that spot in a way that if you come to pipe later in life, it's just hard to get that kind of exposure to it.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of hours that you have to put in, like, it's almost unachievable within a 5-year to 10-year gap, especially being on the tour, to be able to match the amount of hours that he would have put in at Pipeline, growing up on the beach there. And from day one, it's been at Pipeline or Ayakar Beach Park, and whether it's bigger barreling lefts or it's even just those small slabby beach break ones that he's accustomed to, there's so many hours. And the same with Jamie. There's a very small, probably 5 guys that really do it like they do it, and it's not that, my backside tube riding was ever so bad or anything like that. It's just you're competing with the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
So, your good is just not good enough,
Right.
And so you got to look at other avenues on how you can match that, whether it's your competitive nature, and a bunch of other things to be able to match it in that 30 minutes. And that's the bottom line, is you don't have to be the best every day. It's just, you got to be better in that 30 minutes.
The visa thing you mentioned, so interesting. I'd never even heard that or thought of that, as you said, like, because you have a South African passport, if you want to do a strike mission somewhere, you can't just leave in 24 hours. Whereas, if you're in Hawaii and there's this well heading towards Tahiti or somewhere, it's like, I'm gonna leave tonight,
Absolutely.
Is that part of the reason? Because you've actually spent extended periods of time, in California or in Hawaii or in different places, over the course of your career. Was that part of the reason, so you could kind of expose yourself to different places and be within striking distance of different places?
Yeah. Just, I think being in California gives me the ability to be able to strike to Hawaii or even Fiji or or obviously Tahiti. So it makes things a lot more maneuverable when you're out of there. From South Africa, anywhere's far.
Obviously in this conversation and our conversations that aren't being recorded, and certainly in a lot of the clips that you can watch online, you speak so fondly of South Africa and what it means to you. And at 32 years young, are you an advocate of, you believe that you are a product of the environment you grew up in?
Yes, definitely. I think everybody is, I think I wouldn't be the surfer, the person I am if I wasn't raised in South Africa, for sure. I think South Africa is an incredible place, for surfing especially. I think the waves are some of the best in the world, so rich with swell. And then the other side of it is the crowd factor. There's just barely any surfers there. I would say there's probably 10 to 12,000 surfers. There's that amount in Orange County, so being able to go and surf uncrowded perfect waves is like something I cherish, especially now. 80 to 9, probably actually 90% of my year my surfs are with the best surfers in the world, hustling for waves every single time we paddle out. The mornings before the events, while the events are going on, everyone's trying their boards, everyone's doing this. And then after the event, when everyone's finished, they're still trying their boards for the next event. So 90% of my surfs are always battling for waves with the best in the world.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's probably something that goes unappreciated by most of the people out there, because they just see kind of the highlights and you're getting sick waves. As someone who grew up in Orange County, I feel like I'm free to say this, but I think for a number of years, there's been like a proximity component to attention and sponsorship, especially in surfing, right? And, there might be 10 or 15,000 surfers in Orange County, but you look at somewhere like the entire country of South Africa and the performance level is so much higher, right? And it might be a smaller surfing population, but they produce like a comparatively outsized number of world-class surfers, right? And part of it's probably because waves are so good, and part of it's probably because the barriers of entry to surfing there are high enough to where you're probably going to be good if you can do it. Coming from South Africa, did you feel like you had to try harder to get noticed by the surfing world?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember clear as day watching. It all started for me when I actually was watching TJ Barron in the Endless Summer. And I used to watch his clips all the time and think, I could do that. I'm sure you can hear the Grom in
he's
the background.
Good. He's all good.
And it just used to just motivate me and drive me to be wanting to be able to do better and get into the surf films. And like I said, I don't think I really got recognized till I was about 16 or 17. And it was a big push,
And your dad is legendary, globally, but certainly in the South African surfing and shaping community. Do you feel like there was ever another avenue for you aside from becoming a professional surfer with Graham as your father?
I don't think so. Hey, to be honest with you,
you were a good soccer player.
I was. I used to play some good soccer, but looking back at it, it just wasn't me. The amount of effort that was going in. And versus reward, like the risk versus reward, not that there was a lot of risk. It's just you had to wake up every morning at 5:30 a.m., be at the thing training, and then you would only really get to play one game on the weekend. So like all this training, and you would play one little game. I guess it's not too different than surfing, when, so to speak, when you paddle for 4 hours and your ride time is 1 minute.
Sure. That makes sense. And you mentioned your mom's a school teacher. My mom was a school teacher. I know exactly what that's like. Was there ever any tension in you saying like, look, I can't be going to school. I gotta be surfing harder every day. I gotta be surfing more than TJ Barron. I have to go surf. And if so, who won in that argument?
My dad would sometimes forget, to take me to the bus because I had to, I went to school about 35 or 40 minutes away from my house. And I was at a remedial school because I've got like ADHD and a little bit of dyslexia. So I would he would take me to the bus, and sometimes I would miss the bus purposely, and then those days I would get to go to the beach. But for the most part, I'd go to the school, and then I'd stay there. I'd stay there from Monday till Thursday and come home on Friday, and then I'd get from Friday afternoon and the weekends to be able to surf. Just once I started traveling a lot, then I would have to catch up on a lot of schoolwork and things like that. But my mom was definitely one for making sure that I went to school. That's for sure.
And you said you got noticed when you were 16. What was that for you? What do you mean you got noticed and you felt like this might be a professional path for you?
Well, I made it into the first surf film that I'd been involved with on international stage. It was Passion Pop at the time, a Billabong video.
Wade Goodall, I remember this.
Yeah. So there was like a lot of those guys had a lot of hype around them. They were like the next big things and stuff like that. So for me to be in it was like a big accomplishment, and I was pretty proud of that.
I remember this really well. Surfing, it's one of those communities and industries that is obsessed with the cult of youth, and they love paying young talent with potential. And that's kind of a good and bad thing, and we talk about it a lot. If you compare it to other sports, and I'll speak from the United States just because that's the most familiar place, but they have a high school system, they have a collegiate system, and they have a semi-pro system in most sports before you get there. So there's kind of as lax as it probably can be, like an educational marker, right, where you're going through this system before you get to the NBA or the NFL or whatever. Do you think that is something that kind of should exist in surfing and should be instituted in surfing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like you said, surfing hangs its head on the possibilities of somebody being great and paying somebody for being great. But yet a lot of people might not have achieved anything yet. I couldn't imagine in other sports where a baseball player had such a great statistic that he was now going to get paid less than when he first signed and on his potential. That kind of just doesn't make sense to me, but what do I know?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because we even physically, we talk about this with the pro junior age when it moved from 20 to 18, and I wasn't a fan of it because that means that you're done with the juniors when you're 19, and a lot of young men and women are not actually physically matured until they're kind of early to mid 20s, so you're kind of being thrown to the wolves on the QS to a degree and being expected to succeed. And that's not always the best thing for you if you haven't fully physically developed. And maybe there is a parallel there with other sports. Like, as you said, like, even if there's a high school baseball player at 17 that's amazing, there's still a value in letting that person grow and develop into sort of an early 20-year-old before you put them in the majors, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. And I know that a lot of it's sort of dictated by industry contracts, but it does seem wild, again, coming from Orange County, like the amount of money that gets thrown at, 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds, or at least did before the recession, and compared to, people who are winning world titles in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's, look, it's a different industry altogether. I think it's a different sport. It's a different lifestyle. It's so unique. And yeah, it kind of baffles me at times. And then it just seems like the media really drives the sponsorships.
Well, and that's also something that has probably been deconstructed. Well, it's been deconstructed in surfing and kind of everywhere, right? Where probably when you were coming up, it was like, well, there's a few magazines in every country and that's the media, and now It's like the explosion of social media, and, you can do your own film projects. You, Jordy Smith, you can be your own media company in sort of a LeBron James kind of way if you wanted to. How much work have you put into that part of your career?
Not much. to be honest with you.
Maybe
I'm
mercifully so. Like maybe you're like, I don't need it. Like I don't want to spend my life on social media.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to spend my life on social media. That's for sure. I'm just not that guy that's like going to post, check me out doing this, check me out. If it's anything of training, the last thing I want to do is let any of my competitors know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it. And I don't want to give them any motivation into thinking they need to train that day, that minute, whatever, you know? So that side of me just completely is private. Like I would almost take I'm guessing a page out of Kelly's book, so to speak. I don't know. No one really knows what he's doing. You know, so that's sort of the mystery behind it. But at the same time, then you got, you know, Italo. He's going to pretty much show you every single squat that he's doing, every backflip. And then you go to somebody like John, who's not going to show you that side of him, you know? Right. So I think on John's card, it's more, he puts out there what he wants you to see. And yeah, that's, if you've got the money to do that, it's an expensive task. But personally for me, it's just like, hey, you know what, if you got a great clip of me, cool, I'll put it out there, but I'm not going to go like hunting it down. Yeah.
Well, not to give away any secrets, but I mean, observedly, you know, at 32, it does seem like you've worked a ton on your fitness. Do you feel like you're in the best shape of your career at the moment?
Definitely. She's
like compared to when your rookie season, like what do you feel like are the big differences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could talk to any of the close people that were around me during that period. I was rolling up to events before heats, eating hot dogs and cheeseburgers, no worries. Like drinking Coca-Cola like it's nothing, like juice, you know? And so for me, I think just, I wish I knew now what I knew, you know, I could have applied then, but my life just didn't roll out that way. You know, me and my old man came from, we didn't know, even at that point, we didn't know what injuries were and things like that. It's like, oh, you've got a meniscus tear. Like, what? No, it's going to heal tomorrow. It'll be fine. Just keep plugging away. The thing, you know, it doesn't matter. There was just no education, I think, on that side of things. You know, I wasn't kind of brought up in that hybrid mode of like, you know, you need to make sure you're eating soy steak and all these things every day, because it just wasn't, that's not how I was. And I got beefy. I got super beefy this first couple of years, you know?
Yeah.
I think I even look back sometimes at like the first win at J-Bay. I was like 215 pounds, I think. Yeah, just dough ball.
What are you now?
I think I'm like 190 now.
Yeah.
But it's different, you know. Obviously the muscle is different, the lean is different. It's taken a long time to kind of figure it out, but I feel like in the last 5 years, every year has just gotten better and better for me. And I find myself feeling very comfortable with my physical body, and then mentally, kind of just knowing who you are as a person and what you want to achieve.
Was there any particular moment or incident for you where you thought, okay, I need to start looking into, you know, my physical health or my mental health? Or was there any moment for you that stuck out as like, okay, this was a turning point for me?
I don't know. I think not really. No, I think my whole life's just come through trial and error, and just trying something out, seeing how it affects me, and then making the decision from there on like, is it smart to keep doing this or is it not smart? And it's really simple. So if my body and my mind really thrives on it, then I should keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to a few more topics and analyze some of those decisions here, but we're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Jordy Smith. You talk about the trial and error of your career where it pertains to fitness, but I want to talk about surfboards too, because I remember vividly visiting you and your pops at the Rainbow Bay Apartments your rookie season on the Gold Coast. And we had to do something for the ASP. I can't remember what it was, but I remember walking into your place and it was floor to ceiling with surfboards. I do not know how many surfboards you had for the first event, but like if you had told me it was 100, I would have believed you. What was question one? How many boards did you have on the Gold Coast? And then what is your approach to just working with shapers and finding boards that work for you in general? So start with the Gold Coast question.
Well, the Gold Coast was absolutely overwhelming and ridiculous. It was just, I don't know how many surfboards there actually were. We should have counted them, but there were so many surfboards. It was like, I couldn't believe it. Obviously, my father is a mad frother on surfboards. So, and I was a mad frother on surfboards. And I think if I could just boil it down, it just was confusion. There was so much confusion. There weren't enough days in the window to ride that many boards. I mean, there probably were about 45 to 50 surfboards, I would say, in the room.
It goes back to the Ryan Callanan thing of like, well, how can you say no to like more surfboards? But for the listeners out there, how did it work for you at the time when you were getting approached by different shapers, or were people even asking you if you needed boards, or they're like, I want to get my boards under this kid's feet. He's the new deal. I'm just going to shape him, a quiver. Like how did it work for you at that event?
That was exactly how it was. Me coming onto the tour, everybody wanted a board under my feet. Obviously, how it transitioned from my dad's board, I grew up my whole early career on my father's boards until I was about 16. And then I got a couple JSs and they went really well. And then, they basically offered me a great sponsorship, an epic sponsorship deal. At 18, 19, when I joined the tour, that my dad was just like, hey, look, you can't turn this down. The money's so good. I can't afford to make you boards like you're going to need. And I think it's best if you ride for them. And it was a bittersweet thing at the time, because I felt like my dad had put in all the hard work, throughout my whole life. And then, I don't know. I think it was more of a financial thing. I think he's struggled his whole life. So he didn't want me to be in those same shoes. So he thought, this is your time to make some money and set yourself up for your life. So I think you got to do it. And which was great. I rode for JS for a long time. Then from JS, I jumped onto obviously Channel Islands, and those guys were really cool. I started out just before I actually got onto it. I actually got a board that myself, my dad, and L shaped, and I ended up qualifying on that board. I rode it at like a bunch of the events, and then worked a bunch with them. That was super cool. And then the Stab in the Dark, obviously, just kind of reignited a flame, I guess, that I'd always questioned. Just hold on a sec. Sorry, I think my wife's taking out the trash. She's being overly noisy. So if you could please just step out. She's
a saint. Hello, Lyndall.
Jeepers, babe. That's ridiculous. It's like crunching the paper in my ear. Anyways, so then from that point on, I just started kind of questioning myself, like, should I be riding some of my dad's equipment? I was riding Chris Gallagher's surfboards for a while and coaching with him at the same time. An incredible coach. As far as technique goes, I don't believe anybody better. I learned so much with Chris, and was a really close friend. So kind of going back and forth on equipment has been special as well. So then that's obviously led me into thinking about my father and kind of starting our brand together, which obviously Smith Shapes. Again, going back to the COVID time, I feel like it couldn't have come at a better time because it helped me really go home and work on equipment to the point where probably would have taken 3 years to get to, we could do it, within 6 months. And so that was really something special to be able to work with my dad on a whole bunch of new models, getting ready for the season, and just all fun at the same time. I felt like it was really necessary. I felt like if there was ever a time, it was going to be now. And yeah, I'm a mad surfboard freak.
Well, even, Al and Britt, because I know those guys a little bit, speak of like what a high surfboard IQ you do have, and how you are actually, like, if you ever wanted to be a shaper, you'd be a world-class shaper. And that's just not the same for everyone on tour. It probably was, back in the 70s and 80s, where the majority of the world title contenders and even the competitors were building their own equipment. But that's just something that kind of doesn't happen today. And it's very cool to hear that you work on your own boards.
That's funny you say that. I think out of the 20 boards that are here, I think eight of them are boards that I've shaped. And I've been doing a bunch of shaping as of late, and I'm nowhere near where I'd like to be, or some of the experience that, say, my dad has, or some of the other shapers. But it's really, really awesome knowing what's working for you and why it's working for you. Definitely the surfers on tour need to pick up their IQs as far as their surfboards. That's for sure. I'd probably say the only closest guy is maybe Kelly. I think he probably knows the most about his boards outside of everybody else. So I don't know.
Go on.
It's so fun. I mean, I just, one of my thoughts was actually building a bay here in quarantine. I wanted to build it in the spare room, but that ended up being the baby room, so that kind of went out the window. But I wanted to build a little bay in here, and then get a few little tools, put newspaper all over the floor, and then hopefully get a couple blanks delivered, and then spend my time doing that.
I mean, I know you don't want to drop any secrets on social media, but imagine the rest of the CT freaking out by you just building boards in the room while they're like, "What's he doing over there?" And we
just got a planer.
That's right. Yeah, just keeping everyone up at all hours. With Smith Shapes, are you guys working with a stable of shapers, or is it primarily you and your pops?
It's primarily just my dad. Yeah. So we're building most of the boards in Africa, and then we're shipping them basically anywhere. I feel like authenticity is the key, and keeping them African made is really good.
I talked about the joy of getting to watch a number of your clips in the lead up to this conversation, and just how, I was appreciative at the time, but I'll admit probably not as appreciative as I should have been, of just how ahead of its time your approach to wave riding was, specifically on your forehand, but even your backhand in a lot of cases. Do you think that outside some of the technical refinements of working with Chris Gallagher, or even sort of the backhand barrel approach, do you think your approach to surfing's changed a lot in 12 seasons, or is it more just kind of focused intensity with that same approach?
It's a similar approach, I would feel. It's a good question. And to be honest with you, I don't really ever think of my surfing in a way at times. It's more reactive and how the wave allows you to surf, and how I see myself wanting to surf. There's definitely technique aspects of surfing that I think go completely unmissed and unseen. I think unless somebody has to slow it down for somebody to be able to really see what's going on, I think a lot of it just gets missed. And I watch it so closely, and so with so much, like, I don't know, precision. That's the only way you can break it down and really, really understand what's happening in those moments. And that's purely for myself, for my soul, so that I know when I paddle out, I'm going to surf a certain way, whether it fits this or that. Because that's what makes me happy to the core. And yeah.
When you developed your specific approach, and I almost said style, but I suppose, you might actually think there's a style or not, but I'll just say approach. Did you have any reference points that you're like, I want to surf like that person or that person? Because obviously there were a ton of comparisons to Joel when you were younger.
Yeah.
And you obviously had a lot of exposure just being on the Billabong team to guys like Andy. And your style, again, I'm going to use that word, but I'll disclaimer, is very uniquely you. But as you said, there's all these little elements of like just such high level function and power and speed that probably go unappreciated. So I mean, I'm just curious, were there any people that you specifically tried to surf like, or did you just try to take some of their things and apply it to your own approach?
Definitely. When I was younger, starting out with Taj, I thought how quick and all his airs and stuff like that was really exciting to me. That's where I got all my motivation for. And then as far as style, it was Tom Curran and it was Joel Parkinson. Those two guys, I think I just obsessed over of watching, especially, I was probably 12 years old or a little less when I first saw Joel win J Bay at 18. And it was kind of from that moment I thought, oh, this guy just looks so smooth, so relaxed. It was, at 10, 11, 12 years old, that's your focus, Jeffreys Bay. You're thinking in the next little Gromcom coming up, you want to try and surf like that, So that was kind of what I obsessed over until about 18, 19, till I basically got on tour. I started thinking a little different of like, hey, if you're going to copy somebody, you're only going to ever be as good as them. And you're only basically going to be able to do the things they can do. You're never going to be able to do better. So you got to kind of you can take inspiration from what they do, but you can't copy it. And so from that point on, it just became like, okay, well, my style, it is what it is now. And now it's just like, go power, go aggressive, and just attack. Yeah. We
talked about, the hype machine and expectations that you maybe put on yourself or other people put on you. And, there is a class of people almost every year on the men's and women's tour who have achieved sort of radical success objectively. But then when they're hyped to be kind of the next dynasty world title holder, some people like give them short shrift. You can think of like a Julian Wilson or Kalo Handino or an Owen Wright or yourself. Do you feel like I guess another way to put it, do you feel the weight of those expectations, or did you, and do you now, is a good question.
I think I did earlier on. Do I now? No, not at all. I'm very comfortable with like who I am, what I've achieved. Sometimes I feel like it's more, whether it's the hype or the people, the fans, they want it for you so badly. They feel like you deserve it. That's kind of the feelings that I get sometimes, where I'll be like, they'll be like, Cumbria, you got to get this title, you got to do it. And I feel like they're speaking out of a place where it's more for them. I feel like they believe that I deserve it more so. And yeah, that's a really awesome thing to have. I think, some people can take that as like a lot of pressure. But personally for me, it's just like, geez, I'm going to go and give it my everything every single time, every single year. And that's all you can ask for. Eh? I mean, yeah.
I can imagine that for you in particular, like everyone must feel that to a degree, but like you are the sole representative of an entire continent on tour. It's not like there's a bunch of Africans and South Africans on tour that can kind of share the weight. You've got a whole continent that's like, you're our guy. We want you to win.
The biggest continent.
It's a big one. That's right.
Yeah, look, it's an honor. it's an absolute honor, and yeah, a little kind of depressing that there aren't more. You know, we've got lots of talent on the continent, and yeah, the guys just need to hammer it home.
How do you balance? And I'm sure it's taken years of work, because you sound really, really well adjusted and really focused at the same time. But I'm curious how you balance being content and comfortable with what you've achieved and all the success you've earned, with the hunger to perform further, right? Is that sort of a conscious thing that you have to kind of switch on and switch off when you need to?
Yes, I think my personality is to get obsessive over things. So each year you choose a thing to become obsessed over. And a lot of people might think that it becomes the title, or that it's the title, but it's not. It needs to be the work that will get me to the title. So whatever that work is, every year I just keep upping it one and keeping the same from the year before. I can't just do the same thing every year and expect different results. So every year becomes another thing that I obsess over, that I need to put in place, that hopefully will help me achieve my goals.
It's interesting you put it that way, because objective observer, it does feel like that's been really effective, because where maybe some of your peers have stagnated or even fallen behind because the level of talent on tour gets better and better every year, you've maintained like a very high level of performance and a high level of result for a sustained amount of time. So it does seem like that approach is really, really effective. What do you think about the unvarnished opinion about the new WSL Finals format in determining the world champs?
I think it's yin and yang. I think it can go both ways. Obviously, if somebody goes ahead and wins a bunch of competitions back to back, and they should be, running away with their title, and they get sick, whatever, the last day of that event, then it's obviously unfortunate. On the other side of it, I definitely know that the WSL is a business, and that they need to be able to make money. And there's only one way that you can create a grand final, all or nothing. This is where it happens right now, at lower trestles, right and left. I think it's a good concept, and I think this year will be, kind of the teething phase of how things can get better. But for our sport to move forward, I definitely think it's in the right direction. A lot of surfers were very skeptical, and they can be iffy when it comes to change, but change can be good. You've just got to look at it in the right way.
Yeah. I'm speaking on Obsessive. I when this concept came up, Fiji a few years ago, I was obsessed with the legitimacy component and was very much like, no, like, this isn't going to be the same as sort of your Andes or your Toms or people who won through like an accrual of points throughout a season. And I remember we had this conversation with the title holders at the time, all of them that were on tour, and then a bunch of people that were sort of in the mix. And almost to a person, they were like, no, we're in. We like it because, at the end of the day, we don't want to win in the locker room because someone else lost. We want to win in the water because we beat the other best guy. And it was an interesting insight for me. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, the guys that really, and the girls that really want it, like, want to win in the best possible way. And I thought, okay, well, look, I mean, if you guys don't have a legitimacy issue, I don't. But I totally appreciate that it's not I do think this year will be a teething phase, and not everyone's going to love it. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Absolutely. I think we're probably going to see the most viewed event ever in the history of the sport on that finals day. And it's going to be so exciting. I'm going to be there, being a part of it. And yeah.
So you're 32. Kelly Slater's 49. He's going to turn 50 next year. How many more years after Kelly retires are you going to beat his record for staying on the CT? Are you going to surf till you're 60, 65? What's your timeline for competing on the CT?
That all depends. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's another 6 or 7 for sure for me. Yeah, I think definitely. I don't know. Kelly probably still be there.
Who's to say he won't, right?
Yeah. I don't know. You know, I always think about it, and I think about when Taj or Mick or Joel might have retired. I don't think they're retiring necessarily from competing. I think they're more retiring from the traveling and that side of it. If they had events in their backyard, I think they would still keep competing because it's too easy.
Yeah.
You know? And that's kind of what I think everybody gets sick of, is getting back on a plane with 20 surfboards, missioning through everywhere around the world. I think that's what everyone gets sick of.
Yeah.
More so than the actual competing side of it and gunning for those titles.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned, that you consider yourself very fortunate to have signed with high level brands, with O'Neill, with Red Bull, but you're also building out your own set of businesses too, right? Like you're building out your own companies. We talked about Smith Shapes. What are some of the other things you're doing? And is that something you're doing intentionally to kind of bridge towards 6 or 7 years in the future, where you're like, well, at some point I'm going to stop competing on tour, but I'm going to want something to do?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, I've got a very creative mind, and I'm very design orientated and function orientated. So whether it's for the things that I do or that I'm into, like for instance, as of late, we started a non-alcoholic beer company, and obviously it seems to be the thing to do, but for me, it's very fitting, not only because I feel like it benefits me or somebody else that might be a doctor, whatever, a fireman, somebody that's always on call, as our life is. I like to have a bunch of surfs in that day. I know I've got to get up at 6:30 tomorrow morning, but I want to have a beer in the afternoon. So, we started a Heaps Normal beer here in Australia. Then we started, I've joined a brand called DB, which is luggage. And we designed board bags, backpacks, travel equipment, and just kind of keeping things fun, I guess. There's a lot of down days, a lot of things on tour where you can kind of occupy your time. And I just find myself kind of going deep into that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned surfing is so stop-start. It's the same thing where it's like, all right, well, it's blown out. I got to do something with my energy right now because I'm not surfing.
Absolutely. I think keeping your mind active and busy on stuff is good. And then, like I said in the earlier part of this interview, I think really stepping away from from surfing sometimes and allows you to step back in at 100% again. It's hard to really be, at least for my mind with ADHD, it's hard to be on like all the time. And so kind of stepping away, taking a look at something else. Oh, that's pretty. Oh, how about this? How about that? And then boom, back into it,
Yeah. Yeah. And it probably is really effective in a way because you get to pull what you learned or inspiration from different parts and put it back over here, and you can draft off of that and put it in the other space, and you get to kind of sit at a really effective nexus point between a lot of different interests.
Absolutely.
So we put a call for questions out to the Instagram community, and I'm pretty sure this is the most we've ever gotten. I had to rifle through all of them, but we narrowed it down to 3. So Emerson Kemp asks, what do you eat before a pumping day of surfing?
In the morning, we'll wake up. If I'm in South Africa and the waves are going to be firing, I'm normally up at 3 a.m., 3:30 probably. to A, get everybody else up, and B, pretty much make the coffee and make the food for everybody before we go. I just want to make sure everybody's like on my same level, from filmers to friends to everybody needs to be on one level, just buzzing. And so I'll probably eat. I normally do like an overnight oats. I'll soak oats, and then throw bananas, those oats, apples, chia seed flax into a big smoothie, peanut butter, and then blend it up, and I'll hammer pretty much 750 mils of that before I surf. Probably give it like 20 minutes to kind of sit in your stomach, digest before I go and surf. And then when I surf, I'll surf for like 5 or 6 hours straight, and try and hydrate maybe in between if I can, but for the most part, I don't, which is another point. I mean, surfing's got to be one of the most dehydrating sports in the world. You're out in salt water, which is just dehydrating you. You're in the beaming sun, which is just cooking you, dehydrating you, and then you do not take a break. You surf straight for 5 or 6 hours without taking a sip of water, doing strenuous exercise, pretty much like I said, paddling and getting hammered for, 5.5 hours out of the half an hour that you're actually surfing, riding the wave.
It's interesting that you surf for that long, because I run into so many people on tour who are like, I'm programmed to surf for 30 minutes. I surf for 30 minutes and I get out and then I go back. But it's cool that you've
psychotic to me. When the waves are that good, that just does not make sense. That the best wave of the day could come through within that little window. And they're going to be drinking some water on the beach. No time for that.
I like it. All right. So Ben Jerez asks, what is the biggest misconception people have about you, and why do you think that is?
Misconception. I don't know. I felt like maybe early on they thought I was really cocky. I don't know. I think confidence sometimes can come across really cocky.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, last one from the Instagram community. Big name. Kodak Moments Aren't Dead Yet asks, what was your last big purchase?
Red camera.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, you're starting your own media company. You're just not putting it on social media.
Oh, that's just to film my son now.
No. All right, so we've got the final segment. This is the lightning round. It's 10 questions. You got to answer as fast as you can.
Okay.
If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad, bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Last book you read?
Don't read.
Best surf film ever?
I don't know. Alley-oop.
One wave you never have to go back to?
That's a good question. One wave I never have to go back to. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know.
You enjoyed them all. I'm for it. If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life?
Probably New Pier.
Interesting. Best person to share the lineup with?
My father.
Worst person to share the lineup with?
No one.
Finish this sentence. Last one. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
Giving my kid a big kiss.
There it is. Jordy Smith, thank you so much for coming on the lineup, man. When this airs, you guys will probably be out of quarantine. So I look forward to watching you belt the shit out of everyone on tour this year. And I'll link up with you down the track.
Cool. Thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it.
This was awesome. Congrats, buddy.
Thanks, Brew.